All right, good morning, everybody. It's time to get started. Welcome to the November 21st, 2022 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. And first up, we have a presentation on affordable housing resources and programs. Oh, and Vanessa is online. Not sure where everybody else is, just running a few minutes late, I guess.
All right, good afternoon. Today I'll be talking to you about affordable housing resources, programs, and tax incentive options. About halfway through my presentation, I'll invite Brad to come up and talk about the construction excise tax and those tax incentive options. So let's get started. So subject in summary, the City of Grants Pass has multiple resources that can be utilized individually or layered to incentivize affordable housing production and preservation. I will provide an overview of current and proposed housing programs and tax incentive tools. Relationship to council goals are to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community, as well as facilitate sustainable, manageable growth. So I wanted to include this. This is just a powerful reminder to everyone on council about our most recently known breakdown of what the incomes are in our city. So as you can see, 18% of our city populace qualify as extremely low income. That's under 30% of the moderate family income. Moderate family income and area moderate income are usually about the same, if not exactly the same. So just be aware that those can be pretty interchangeable. 14% of our populace fall under very low income. That is 30 to 50% of the moderate family income. 21% of our populace would qualify as low income. So that's 50 to 80% of the moderate family income. Now those first three groups are usually what we're talking about when we're talking about affordable housing programs, is under the 80%, and some of the more restrictive fall under the 60%. So that's kind of where we talk about. And then when we go into the 80 to 120%, which is 21% of our populace, that's where we're usually talking about affordable home ownership programs. And then 27% of our populace are above the 120% moderate family income. Last time we checked, which was just a little under a year ago, the average home purchase price was at about 167% of our moderate family income. So just to keep that in mind. So this infographic helps to understand the level of impactfulness for various different incentives that we as a city can offer. As you can see, more of the educational, informational, still relevant, still important, but it is less impactful as compared to the heavy funding and land acquisition, as you can see on the right here. And I wanted to also provide, this is an example that we've seen before that was provided at our last RFP for Ramsey, Nebraska, of how their funding was going to break down. The red section at the very top on the right side here, that funding gap is what usually this localities can address with their funding. It is a small piece of a lasagna of different fundings and ways to get these projects through the finish line. So our puzzle, went a little too far. So our puzzle of tools to incentivize affordable housing, we do have various tools. We have the Affordable Housing SDC waiver. We have the Housing Opportunity Fund, which is this construction excise tax. We have Community Development Block Grant, which heavily relies on helping existing homeowners to upkeep and age in place. We have the Urban Renewal Agency funding. We have one-time grants such as ARPA and the Department of Administrative Services. And we also have city surplus property that we have in the past and can continue to leverage should we decide to. The Affordable Housing Grant was formally adopted in October of this year for the purpose of creating System Development Charge Incentive Program for developers of affordable housing. This is 60% and under, and the funds come from the sale of surplus land. Again, these go to units that are 60% of the area moderate income or under, and we provide a 100% system development charge waiver to programs who apply. These go to new rental units, and they do get deed restricted for 30 years. Most recently, the 56-unit Cathedral Square was awarded a grant for $347,057 for their SDC grant in November, and this does leave a balance currently of $316,943. We are still expecting some funds to hit that account balance when the Ramsey, Nebraska sale goes through. For Community Development Block Grant, again, this program is passed down through HUD, and the city receives annual funds to be used for the projects that benefit low to moderate income. That's 80% or below of the area moderate income households through a variety of activities that are determined through our annual action plan. The main ones that go towards housing are our housing weatherization program and our housing rehabilitation program. As of November 10th, we have processed 9 low-income households to be approved for our CDBG rehab grants. In total, our last round, we got about 70 applicants, and we are still processing down that wait list. We've just gone, our first wave has been this first to 9 that we're processing. So we're still moving forward on more of those. Our Urban Renewal Agency, most recently adopted Urban Renewal Agency plan includes a housing development program that is dedicated to funding affordable housing for those at 80% of the area median income or below. After a 2022 minor amendment was approved by council, this housing activity is now allocated for $10 million in funding over the life of the Urban Renewal Agency, and no funds have yet been dispersed from this project. Again, this goes for households at or below 80%. And what can be used with these fundings is quite broad. You can do pre-development assistance, construction, demolition, property tax rebate. There's a lot of options through this. The main constraint is the location. It does have to be in the urban renewal area. Our one-time grants, we have ARPA and the Department of Administrative Services. I think we're fairly familiar with those. Most recently, council has allocated just over $3 million to the Jackson County Housing Authority and the Josephine County Housing and Community Development Council to purchase land and develop affordable housing. We also have an additional $1,600,000, just over that, allocated to jumpstart development in the urban growth boundary through an infrastructure request for proposal. The Department of Administrative Services did pass us down $1 million grant. Of that, $80,000 has been allocated to the Grants Pass shelter for operating funds, and the remaining funds are being reserved for the purchase of a property for a navigation center. The funds from this grant do need to be expended by June 30th of next year. And then we have city surplus land. Our city does periodically sell land that the city owns. We can sell it as affordable housing, or we can simply offload it. We do have those funds set to go towards the affordable housing SDC waiver fund. The city has designated creating a land bank program as a priority in the 2022 strategic planning. We've had a couple talks about that. It may require some extra funding, so we still have more to move forward on looking into that. And then we have some other housing tools under consideration. We've brought forward to you some drafts of the housing production strategies, which will be pushed through and hopefully finalized next year. Our next meeting for that goes in front of the Housing Advisory Committee for the last time in December, and then early next year it'll go in front of UAPC and City Council before being asked for approval. Some of these actions are to develop a program to support affordable home ownership, to support preservation of regulated affordable rental housing and manufactured home parks, support rehabilitation of existing low-cost unregulated housing, and to use Urban Renewal Agency funding to support housing and infrastructure development. And then we have the construction excise tax as our last piece of the puzzle. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Brad to give us a little talk on the proposed investment structure for that construction excise tax.
Good morning. So, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. You actually received a memo just a few weeks ago from Aaron on this topic. So a lot of this information is in there. I'll go over pretty quickly, but we wanted to highlight a couple of the outcomes of Friday's meeting. The Housing Advisory Committee had a meeting on Friday, and they talked about the construction excise tax and had a few thoughts. So I wanted to kind of pass those along to you as well. So in terms of a quick overview on what was in the November 3rd memo from Aaron, you adopted the ordinance that allowed for this tax December 1st. This is largely built on Senate Bill 1533, which the state adopted in 2016. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but a lot of what's in that ordinance is coming straight out of that Senate bill. We began collecting revenues on the construction excise tax in March of this year. And the ordinance has some general guidelines in it, but as you know, the Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee met after the council adopted that ordinance and raised a few concerns. Some city staff met with the Chamber Committee, and one of the outcomes of that discussion was that they would like to see, a little bit clearer guidance on exactly how the city intends to utilize the proceeds from this tax. So that's a little bit of background on how we got to where we are. So we've got a little over 6 months of data to this point that we've collected on the tax. That second sentence there in the first bullet's important, that a longer period of collection could result in a different projection. Anytime, we're talking about building permits and what's going to come in the door, and the fact that the construction excise tax is directly related to those building permits and the valuation of those permits creates a big unknown, really. We really don't know from month to month what's going to come in the door, but what we're showing here is our historical data, and that's what we have to work with. So the 6 months that we have is shown here. The first column there is broken down basically the three types of projects that we have. These are essentially sub-accounts that finance has set up. So when the construction excise tax revenue comes in the door, they are put into these three categories. So the first one there, the residential 35%. There's a residential 50% and then commercial 100%. Each of those has a little bit different guidance in terms of what's allowed there. So you can see on 6 months there's about $142,000 of revenue that's come in, with a yearly projection just under $285,000. So coming around to what those categories are. Residential 35%. The state statute and our ordinance say that the revenues under that amount, so 35% of the net proceeds that come in, can be used for affordable housing programs and incentives. And there is a requirement that those benefit people that are at the 80% of area median income or below. For the 50% of the residential tax that comes in, both the statute and our ordinance say that's for development and construction. There is no requirement in terms of which population benefits from that. The Housing Advisory Committee did have some discussion about that on Friday, and they recommended that we stay with the 80%, although you could change that. The main reason for that is because if you look at the median price of our housing right now, that in terms of where the need is met, sort of that 80% and above, the feeling there's supply can be met there going up to 120%, but in terms of where the need for infusion of some of some extra support, which is what this tax is intended to do for tenants or for builders or for home buyers, was more at that kind of 80% of area median income. And then the commercial, that's also for development and construction. Those are the allowable uses, not for housing programs such as down payment assistance or rental security deposit assistance, things like that. But that footnote, you can see the word construction does include house repairs, house improvements, if you want to do an addition on your house, converting an existing, single-family house to a duplex. Those all fall under the term construction, so we're not, just talking about funding somebody to build something from the ground up. So that's something to remember. And that one does have 100%. This is in the city's ordinance that you passed last December. Says that all of the commercial funds need to go to people at 100% of area median income or below. So that first bullet, I think Eric kind of already addressed. We have those three revenue types that are in the construction excise tax. 4%, again, it gets taken off the top for administration, and then 15% goes straight to the Oregon Department of Housing and Community Services. They collect that for their down payment assistance program and then reinvest that in Grants Pass. That 15% is not taken on any of the commercial construction excise tax. That's only on the residential portion. The distinction between the 35% and the 50% relates to the intended use, and that's who receives that. We went over that on the last slide. The residential 35% go to 80%, and then there is no AMI target for the other. So talking about the 50% category, the statute ORS 197.309 does have some guidance on where that particular CET fund can be spent. They can be used for finance-based incentives. They can be used for full or partial property tax exemption, although that can only be used if your project is benefiting 60% of area median income or below. The property tax option is not available for anything above 60%. And then number 7 there is got 3 pieces to it. First is increase the number of affordable housing units in a development, decrease the sale or rental price, and then build units affordable housing at 80%. So that's really the kind of the developer incentive type. So you can see there's quite a bit of latitude in that language that comes out of the statute. So where are we recommending this to go locally? The allowed use of the CET funds are set, as I mentioned, and then some funds are intended to provide direct assistance. Others are intended for production of housing. The investment strategy that we have is proposed to begin using the 50% of the residential 35%. I know this is getting confusing in terms of verbiage, but if you refer back to that other table, that may help. But to basically hold back some of that funding so that we can allow for a pot of money to build up that's actually meaningful in terms of the amount for a developer to use. This is how several of the cities around Oregon are using this. Eugene is one example where they have set aside, and they've been using this since 2017 when the ordinance passed, statute passed, basically to increase the amount there. So it would just be building over time. So the household assistance would be provided to persons or households at or below 80% And for cost effectiveness, it's proposed to use local nonprofit partners such as Options, such as UCAN, to partner with in terms of dispersing those funds and not have the city staff do that. They already have those programs set up for income verification. In terms of the cost of new construction, so this is getting at why the recommendation is to allow that fund to kind of build up. And you experienced this just a couple weeks ago with the Cathedral Square project, who received the $360,000 SDC grant, and they had expressed how significant that was in terms of finishing off their ability to complete the project. So the proposal here is to basically allow that fund to build up to $500,000 or by July 1, 2024, whatever that amount is. And then there would be a RFP that would go out prior to that. So we would know, what amount of money we have built up in that account. The RFP would state that. It would open it up for anyone who wants to apply for the use of those funds. They would make a proposal. Obviously, there's going to be some eligibility criterion built in there in terms of what they can and can't submit for, but that most of those funds that we're talking about collecting would just build up into that fund, and we would have them outlined in that request for proposals. So using that current revenue ratio, the $500,000 incentive would be dedicated $225,000 to housing units serving 80%, and $275,000 of it would go to benefit 100% of area median income. So again, we're kind of in a build-up phase at this point, and based on council's direction today and in future workshops, we can change that, but that's where we're at with that recommendation. Mayor, did you want me to just finish off with these other two? There's a lot coming at you.
I guess let's see if anyone has questions right now. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I have two questions. So on slide 20, 5D, full or partial exemption from property tax for 60% AMI or below. Over what duration? Is that like a 1-year waiver, or is that, how long are they getting that exemption for?
So under this next two slides that I'm going to talk about, the year that they use in the multi-unit property one is 10. The years for the nonprofit tax exemption is 20. So those are two property tax programs that are separate from this. But I just wanted to let you know. I mean, that's in the two ways that you can get property tax exemptions for multifamily housing today under Oregon statute. There's a 10-year and a 20-year. Now, what we're talking about here is really up to the council, because this is using construction excise tax funds and is kind of would be a separate property tax exemption. So at this point, there actually is not a specific time frame, but I think our experience is that no less than 5 years in order to really make it meaningful, and probably 10 years in terms of an exemption would be what would be needed for an incentive.
Okay, thank you. And then on slide 21, kind of the middle paragraph, part of what could be included is rental or security deposit assistance for persons or households renting. I don't know the answer to this, but I question the need for this. It seems like a pretty extreme overlap with what UCAN already does. I mean, I know a number of tenants who seem to be able to put their hands on deposits and rental money and all kinds of stuff through UCAN, and I just wonder how much of this is needed from the city as well.
Yeah, no, it is a good point. One of the things the Housing Advisory Committee talked about Friday was, this would only be available if that source of money through UCAN was tapped out. So it'd basically be there as a backup, if in fact that ever really, because you're right, there are some other sources of revenue for rental deposits.
And just to make the point, I don't know how many people get turned down for those sources, but I know a lot that have gotten a lot of help consistently from UCAN, and it doesn't seem like, again, I'm not an expert, doesn't seem like a need where UCAN is allowing a lot of that to fall through the cracks. It seems like they're taking care of it, so.
Valerie?
Yeah, I just want a little bit of clarification. So that is 50% of the 35% that they're recommending for that, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So here, this is the 50%, or I'm sorry, the 35% was a yearly projection of $68,000.
Right, and they recommended
So-
that 50% of that be set aside for the UCAN similar for people who need help with the, I'm just kind of just going over that. My biggest thing was the next part of it, the CET investment strategy, which was having it built up to get to a larger number so you had more to do with it, which makes total sense. Is that the 50% of the residential and the full amount for the commercial? Because there's a lot of numbers being thrown around, so I'm just kind of making sure that I have
Right.
clarity.
Do you want to jump in, Doug? Doug, Housing Value
Yeah,
Chair.
so I'm going to go back one step because it'll help to address that. We're recommending that 50% of the 35 be available for that, but not guaranteed for that.
Okay.
And that's in the case UCAN runs out of funding, or some of the churches who do the same thing come to us and say, hey, we could use this funding because we don't have it, and there's this surge or wave of people that need it. But it's not a guarantee of that. And yes, if that 50% of the 35 doesn't get used or any of the others doesn't get used, it just continues to build. So I think that answers that second portion of your question.
Okay. I think so. I just want to make sure that we were talking about that the commercial part of it also is a part of the 50% investment project. Yes.
That the commercial is part of the build of the giant
Right.
egg,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And
I
then
just want to clarification.
potentially 50% of the 35 can be available for rental assistance down payment.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
DJ?
Yeah, so using that as an example, the intent of the body being who allocates the money, who's the grantor of these monies, just using that as an example, would the intention be to grant money to UCAN for those specific subsidies? Would people be applying directly to the city to get these kind of subsidies? So using that as an example to understand who would be the grantor of those monies, it goes into the greater expansion of who's going to be the grantor of and facilitator of all these programs.
Right. Do you want to
Sure.
start?
Yeah, so our assumption in our conversations at HAC was that for rental assistance programs, that would be through UCAN or whatever other agency would ask for funding from us as a lump sum, whereas the money from the CET for development projects, that would be a grant from the city with either through RFP or come ask us for money and then we'll start discussing the RFP process or something like that. That's the assumption from our discussions.
Sure, thanks.
Which would be quite similar to, what we're doing now through the economic development and the SDC grant program. So it takes a lot less, time in terms of, and we already kind of have a system at the city for doing that. So on the RFP side, I think we're pretty comfortable with that.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay. So the last few slides are talking about the two property tax exemptions that are provided under state statute for multiple family affordable housing projects. These were These have been talked about a little bit by HAC in the subcommittee during the housing production strategy work that's going on with our consultant, Eco Northwest. That's an 8-year strategy. To date, these two incentives, because of the complexity and the involvement of other taxing agencies in the county, have actually been slotted for discussion, several years down the pipeline. I think we were just including them here so that the council is aware of what they are, in case you have some interest in pursuing them earlier. But you'll see in the housing production strategy that's coming forward to you in a couple of months, that these two programs, the multiple unit property tax exemption and the nonprofit property tax exemption, are recommended to be pushed out, a few years. So this is really more just, kind of hitting the highlights of them so you know what they are. The multiple unit property tax exemption, this allows cities to offer this tax exemption, and this is specific to the value of just the structures, not the land. And they do have to meet certain specific local criteria. You have to have an agreement in place. The terms can be set by the city, and you can change and expand those as long as the basic eligibility that's in the Oregon statute is met. But the two main ways that we could explore as a city using these is to either incentivize mixed income development through inclusion of below market units that are in otherwise market rate development. So a developer would come through and maybe have a certain number of units, that are market rate, but then some of their units would be at the 80% or below. And they'd be able to use this property tax exemption on just those units that are at the affordability rate. And then it could also be used to incentivize owners of existing low-cost market rate housing to rehab without, displacing tenants or escalating rents. So this is the one that I mentioned, Councilor Pell, that is in the statute that can be used for a maximum of 10 years. The city could set a shorter time frame on this if desired. It's not automatic for each project. So if the city adopted an ordinance that says, yes, if you're building in Grants Pass, you could be eligible for this, that doesn't mean that they're going to get it automatically. You still have to apply and go through the process. There's several cities that have this in Oregon. One that we looked at was the city of Newport. They've had this in place since 2017. They have added some other criteria for theirs, their MUPTI. A couple of the features of theirs that they're only available if you create 3 or more rental units or renovation projects that add 2 or more to an existing property. They also require that those units be within a quarter mile of a fixed bus route, and also that they're only eligible in certain zones. They also require the developer to prove that project is not financially feasible, but for the tax exemption. So there's basically a pro forma that has to be submitted that the city of Newport then sends out to a financial expert to review and assess, and then that financial expert gives their report back to the city, all that before that property tax exemption would be approved. So that's the first one. The second one that's eligible under the state is this nonprofit corporation low-income housing tax exemption. This is in ORS 307.541. This has been around much longer, since 1985. This has been authorized. I checked in with, just because in my background this is a little different, in other states, but Chris Parton, who is our chief deputy assessor with Josephine County, confirmed for me a couple of weeks ago that nonprofit corporations are not exempt from property taxes in Oregon unless there is a specific exemption or statutory provision qualifying that property use. And that, you would have to basically follow what this guideline is. Even though you're nonprofit, you're not automatically going to get those. The city would need to adopt this provision before, the assessor would say, okay, yeah, you're going to be reduced or exempt from certain property taxes. So these are intended for 60% of area median income for the first year. You can actually, and Newport does this, they say you have to come in for your first year at 60%, but then any year after that, you could be at 80% of area median income. You do have to be, certified by the IRS, of course, and demonstrate that. It offers a few options for nonprofit affordable housing developments to receive it without partnering with a housing authority. It is best for reducing costs for publicly subsidized housing to partner, but you can do it either way. And then the city can adopt additional criteria, just like in the MUPD example, the first one we talked about. This does only apply to city property taxes, which right now account for about 42% of the property taxes in Grants Pass. So there's a whole sort of ratio and that's explained in the statute, and we won't get into that because, again, this is just sort of giving you a highlight of what's available. But the bottom line here is that would not be enough for the city council to adopt this ordinance. There would have to be agreement from other taxing entities in Josephine County in order to get to that 51% of overlapping. So the total, you have to get to that 51% mark for all the taxing entities before this could kick in. This one has the 20-year option for how long the property tax exemption would be good for. It's typically used with developers who are already receiving some kind of state or federal funding. So it's much easier for them since they're already doing that process. And as I mentioned, numerous cities have adopted it. Tualatin just adopted it a few months ago. Did you want to add anything on those, Doug? Okay.
Well, in all seriousness, the multi-unit property tax exemption one we should at least discuss that, just because that acronym's fun to say. MUPD?
Yeah.
It's fun to say. So nothing else, we should talk about that.
So that's what we have. We have what Amber presented, is kind of the highlights of overview. It's at your discretion in terms of call for action today. A couple of alternatives: you could direct staff to formalize and bring forward a resolution to adopt a CET investment strategy, or if you want us to bring back a much more detailed one, we could suspend that until the housing production strategy comes to you, which is the comprehensive look at how we're going to address all of our affordable housing and market housing. Actually, it includes all of it. That's a spring 2023 workshop that you're going to be having. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Chamber of Commerce that has a committee who has expressed some interest. So that's also on the table. However you want to give us some direction there.
Thanks, Brad. Council, do you have questions? Or go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Brad. So the Chamber of Commerce has indicated some interest. Doug, is the Housing Advisory Committee also interested in input in the housing production strategy, or do you want to see things moving forward now rather than holding it off for later?
I think we could move forward on most of these items if you can give us guidance. We think the CET, our recommendation was the 80%, which is the line to shoot for the CET, and then the other recommendation was 50% of the 35% be set aside or be allowed to be used. Set aside is not the right word. Be allowed to be used for housing assist or income rental assistance, down payment assistance. That makes sense or not?
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're ready to move those forward. The housing production strategy, when that comes in the spring, there's a whole long list of things. And we don't see the reason to put off, if you all are comfortable, we don't see the reason to put off the CET direction. It'd be nice to get that to the chamber and to the business community as soon as we can.
Okay, I appreciate that input. Thank you.
Valerie?
Just because I want to say MUPT, now that you enticed me, I will say I was on the subcommittee for the MUPT, and the hesitation that that subcommittee had was the fact that Josephine County has a very limited amount of property tax flexibility. There are other communities that have more flexibility because they have a larger amount of property tax, and you know where we are in Josephine County. So that's one of the reasons they hesitated a little bit with that one, is because they felt that it might directly impact public service. So I think that's why they, public safety funding and that sort of thing. And so I think that's why they kind of said, this is a good thing, and I'm not, whatever, but that might be a good reason to put it off a little bit to see where that goes. But that is what the discussion was in the subcommittee about the MUPT.
Yeah, and that's the rub. Do you develop, it brings in more economy, or do you not give away incentives because you're going to lose taxes? But the development brings in more taxes. There's the rub.
But not necessarily if it's for below 60%. I'm just letting you know, or whatever. So there's, like I said, there's just a lot of factors and things that kind of feed into that.
Whose subcommittee was that?
Housing Production Subcommittee.
Okay,
The,
for the city.
with Eco Northwest, yeah.
Okay. Joel?
So I'm a little bit confused, and maybe I just need some clarification. It seems to me like the construction excise tax actually pays the property tax. So Josephine County would not be out of any property tax.
Well, we're talking about what could be two separate things. The construction excise tax could be dedicated for property taxes, if you so choose, or if an applicant applies, or you can offer property taxes. You can sign up or push the MUPT thing.
Beyond
so you can
the
do
excise
both.
tax, beyond the excise tax amount.
Right.
Okay, I see.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, I have a question about the MUPT. You said in the housing production strategy, the timeline to potentially look at that is a little bit down the road, 2 or 3 years down the road. How complicated is it to implement something like that? Is it going to take another couple years to implement, or once we decide to do it, is it, I don't know what the time frame for implementing something like that is.
Yeah, I don't think we have a good answer for that, right, in terms of the amount. I mean, we have templates, in terms of language that we can rely on. This has been adopted by several other communities in the state. We have those resources to tap into. I don't think in terms of actually getting the drafting completed that complies with the state statute that it would really be that difficult of a process. It would really be more about the public hearing process and then just your discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to add that a little bit, because if you go for the 20-year exemption, part of it is you do have to get the other taxing districts to agree. So we would have to go to the school districts and ask them to be willing to give up their property tax money, as well as the library district for a percentage. So I think that's part of it. It's not just the city adopts it and that's how it goes. I think maybe for the lesser one that didn't involve. But I know for the 20-year one, which is, it does involve getting out and asking the other taxing districts to give up that amount of money.
Both, isn't it? Yeah, that applies to both. So I should have mentioned that, Councilor DeLaGrange, that getting to that 51% of the overlapping taxing districts for the exemption is for the tax collections. That requirement applies to both the MUPT and the property tax, the nonprofit. So, that's really, in terms of the time frame, that's really where the work comes in.
Okay, thanks.
Joel?
So since there's those two conditions, one where you have a property tax exemption that isn't backfilled by the construction excise tax, and you have the property tax exemption that is backfilled by the construction excise tax, the MUPT and the nonprofit tax exemption on slide 23 and 25 are both not filled back in, is that correct? By the construction excise tax, and the 50% category over on the other side that talks about the construction excise tax does backfill it in. Do I understand that right?
I'm not sure I understood your question, but there are a couple of different options being offered.
Right.
One is you choose to allow the construction excise tax to be used for,
Backfilling,
or for relief of property taxes.
okay.
I own some place, I got to pay property taxes, I ask for a grant, you give me a grant for 5 years worth of property taxes. That's
Sure.
one concept being described today.
And
then
which
there's
concept is that before us here?
That's the CET one.
The CET one, okay,
one way that you can choose to use CET.
okay.
One of the ways. And then there's these other things that are unique in themselves, and that is the nonprofit tax status, property tax relief, and then the MUPT.
And that isn't backfilled unless we choose to make that in addition.
It is not a backfilled.
Right.
MUPT is just a relief of property taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Other questions? Valerie?
I don't know if this is a question. I do know that I was at the Friday meeting for the Housing Advisory Committee, and there wasn't anybody there from the chamber. I know Josie had wanted to be there, but she was actually sick, and she didn't get enough warning ahead of time or whatever, I don't know. But, or even I know that there's like the home builder group or whatever. Is it possible to get it out to them before we do the final adoption of it, or that the Housing Advisory Committee or somebody explains to them what you're recommending be used? I'm just trying to get a kind of a broader.
We certainly could, but what's the purpose? If it's to let them know what the process is going to be, well, then that's after you decide what the process is, we'll let them know how they apply for the money, right? If that's your purpose. If it's to ask their input, is 80% a good number, or 50% of the 35, is that reasonable? Does that bring value? If that's what you're after and asking them, then we certainly could.
Okay.
I think DJ's in starting up a new group or has it reconstituted, the local Builders Association, and then Josie, we could certainly call Josie and see if she has concept or input on it. We certainly could do that.
Well, the reason I said that is I was at the meeting with the government affairs, and they did, kind of want to know, and so I just kind of feel that I don't know if they were if the government affairs was given the fact that it was going to be addressed at the housing committee or not. I don't know that, but I just feel like they really did want to know, and I don't know whether maybe I'm asking TJ, did they really want to know after or in the process, and that's what I'm not sure of.
So I'll intend to bring this forward to stakeholders, is that the appropriate venue to get feedback on allocation as CET from that association? I'm unsure. But bringing it to their attention and seeing if they have any input, I think is going to be a process that'll happen just kind of through that. But I wouldn't hold the train up on this one to see what that association thinks at this point.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, I agree with what they're doing, and that's not that. It's just like sometimes we rush things through and then we get the lamb blast from the outside, so sometimes it's not sure.
Yeah, for this
That's
one, I
really
kind
good.
of agree with DJ. I'm not sure you need to hold up a decision. I think
Okay.
where the value is for the greater economic community is to clearly describe what the process is so they can see if it fits their project or not, or make a project that fits the funding.
Okay, and I'm assuming that would be at a meeting anyway, that we make a motion to go forward, that, it would have to go to a council meeting at some point, am I correct?
Yes?
I would, so,
no
yeah,
process.
so and I guess we're not in discussion yet, so I'll wait.
Brian, then Joel?
I had a question. about allowable uses for the CET. You don't have to go back to slide 4, but on slide 4, it has this chart where it has things you can do from least impactful to most impactful. And the most impactful thing is land acquisition and disposition, which essentially sounds kind of like a land bank program. Is that an allowable use for CET funds if that land that's land banked is used for some portion of affordable housing?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So, based on what you told me then, Doug and Brad, and geez, I appreciate both you guys. Under the call to action, the first alternative is to direct staff to formalize and bring forth a resolution to adopt a CET investment strategy. Now, what we had presented here also was the tax exemption that didn't have anything to do with CET. So basically the decision space that we're talking about today and moving ahead is CET.
Correct, yeah, we just wanted to confuse you by throwing extra stuff in there.
There's
And
more than
again, we really like that acronym MUPTI. We wanted to just say MUPTI a few more times. Yeah. it's just the way all there is to
So
it.
we're not talking about property tax exemption without backfilling by CET. We're talking about what to do with the CET dollars. And then if the council and the housing committee and the powers that be want to proceed with property tax exemption, that would be a different topic.
Yes, I think it's more of an FYI. This is out there and we're going to be talking to
Okay.
you about it in the future. And it sort of is a parallel to what we're talking about here. Yeah. And you're
Okay.
really, I don't know if investment's probably the best term for to what you're doing. You're figuring out how to allocate it.
Sure, I understand. Okay, well, that clarifies it for me then. Thank you.
And just to reiterate, I think because the council adopted the CET in December of last year, it's been there for a while now. We're starting to see the accumulation of funds. We thought, you may want to consider focusing on that. The other two are maybe better understood in the context of the overall housing production strategy, so you can see where those actions fit with all the others. But, the CET, it's been in place and it expires in 5 years, potentially.
My confusion has been cleared. Thank you.
Brian.
Mud.
I just had one more question about the CET. Have we done any sort of analysis on what other Oregon cities are doing with their CET?
We looked at Ashland, Eugene, Bend, and Medford in particular as part of the research. Ashland doesn't use the CET, so we really just ended up with Eugene, Bend, and Medford. Bend is in a little bit different situation in that they began a similar program prior to the state legislation kicking in, so they are working with a little bit broader parameters. So it really comes down to kind of Medford and Eugene. Medford pairs up their CET very closely with their urban renewal agency. They kind of use it more in that way, with more targeted just in the blighted areas. And then Eugene, does have a broader program. They have the buildup. I think they use $500,000 as their goal, and then every 2 years they open it up for RFPs.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? DJ?
So yeah, this is information, it's good information. I think that this is just right up the alley with what council's been after. My concern at this point would be doing anything that might be contradictory to that housing production strategy. It's probably difficult to anticipate at this point based on where they're at with that, but do you know if there's intention for recommendations for a CET of those kind of programs in that housing production strategy so far?
Amber, do you want to come up and address that?
So the only recommendation the housing production strategy has around the CET is to get the program in place. That's it.
Yeah,
Just
and
get it to the point that people can apply for it.
right. get it up and functioning. I think to your question, or to the point you're bringing up, is are we going to contradict something, or will we run parallel? And most of the housing production strategy is either elimination of code or changing of code, or create incentives. And the CET is one of the pockets of money they're going to be used for the incentives. So they really, the CET will feed the ideas or concepts in the housing production strategy.
Yeah,
So they don't really contradict at all. It's more of a parallel or a feeder.
And none of these would be doubling of any of the work that we're proposing in that either, if that's one of your concerns.
Sure, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that would be part and parcel to that concern of contradiction would be doubling up, but it's not a concern anymore, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, no other questions. Council discussion. Somebody I remember saying they had a topic. Val?
Yeah, I'm just going to suggest that we move forward and give the direction to come up with a resolution that would bring forward the Housing Advisory Committee's recommendation for CET tax.
Brian?
I don't know if I'm quite ready to bite that off. The recommendation to use some of our CET funding for direct assistance is kind of a duplication of efforts, because there's already part of the ordinances, there's already 15% of that money that goes towards that. So we would be allocating a second chunk of money towards that, that I think would come up to about 30-ish% of our total CET value.
I just want to clarify that 15% that goes up to the state for home buying. It has nothing to do with rental assistance. So it has absolutely nothing to do with that. And I think, and I think you're right, Rob, we don't really know, but I think part of the thought behind it is that there are a lot of people, and we heard it at the Housing Advisory Committee, there are a lot of people right now who cannot come up with a deposit to move into a rental program. And that is a real need in our community, and could even be more so of a need in the community if we have more financial issues coming down the road because of the economy. So I think that was what they were just kind of trying to say. It's the rental, that the getting into a place that is hard for a lot of people to save the money to make a rental deposit to be able to get into a place. So that was my take on that. But I do know the 15% is totally a different fund, and that is for first-time buyers buying and getting into a house.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. I'll stop there.
Did you have something, Doug?
No, that was.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I don't doubt that there can be a need for rental assistance and down payment assistance and all that kind of stuff, or I should say deposit assistance. And I'm sure that there are people out there that actually don't even know that UCAN's an option. I've run into people like that who didn't even know that they had options of places that they could go to ask for help. But with that said, when I voted for to support the CET, I envisioned that as construction excise tax, that it was going to be taxed on construction that would be essentially turned back around in one form or another to create more construction. It was really that simple in my mind, and maybe I missed it, but that was what I thought I was voting for. I never thought that any of those funds are going to be essentially used for operational funding for social services, which is now as far as I'm concerned, the new thing that we're hearing in the room today. So while I understand that there could be a need for that, that's not what I voted for when I voted for the construction excise tax. So I'm not in favor of having some of that funding to be helped towards essentially rental assistance. I just think it doesn't really pertain to what we originally discussed about the construction excise tax.
DJ?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of reflect that as well, kind of where I'm at. I thought reinvestment into development, into construction was kind of the goal of this. Whereas there is a need for rental assistance, that's kind of a different story. If I could stack that onto, we're not talking about a lot of money being garnered by the construction excise tax here. It's far less than we anticipated, and if we were flush with funds here, maybe that'd be a different discussion from my end, but since that we're not talking about a lot of money, I think narrowing it down to the intended purpose a little bit closer would be a wise thing to do.
Rick?
I also like Rob's comments, because I think it's been mentioned that when it comes to rental assistance, there's other programs already out there. So if we're diluting the CET tax for new construction, then I think we're maybe defeating our purpose. The second question I have for Valerie, did you want to have the chamber provide any input at this point before we go forward?
Well, I think they should, I think there will be a time for input between when the resolution gets up and we do it, and we actually make it possible. I mean, because there is a time between that. Nothing happens until we have it at a city council meeting. So, yeah, I definitely want to get this information to the chamber.
Because I think it would be handy to have their input as well. Thank you.
Joel?
Well, the other information that would be handy too when it comes back to us is that rental assistance program, how close are they to running out of money actually? Because that could be tough as well, and I understand and I can support what Rob and DJ talked about and what Valerie talked about, but I don't know how close they are to running out. So that would be another added information so we can make an informed decision.
So you can get various grants from various areas, so their funding can change from year to year. From my experience as a property manager, there are times where that funding is there, and there are times where it runs out, and they say check back every week until maybe we have it again. But it is off and on that they have it. So there are definitely times when it runs out. It just depends on what grants are available for them to receive and whether they can get it that time around.
I have a note from Vanessa that she can't hear the audio any longer. Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Brian?
I would just agree with what Rob and DJ said earlier. I liken this to operational funding versus capital funding, and I essentially mirror Rob's comments earlier, so I'm not necessarily interested in the rental assistance piece.
She says it's back. Okay. DJ?
So, yeah, that being said, I don't think there's a reason not to direct the process in the right direction. Start creating a document, try to start realizing the investments, and if it comes to us on a Wednesday and we don't have the input that we need, we can always say, hey, we're not quite ready yet. But I see this as a good starting point, nonetheless, to get the ball rolling, to continue staff working on towards the goal here.
Okay, so I guess at this point, it sounds like it's shaping up that the goal is not to include that half of the 35%, but that you are interested in saving up the CET for a year or two before making any big decisions on allocations? Yes? Nobody's, all right. Guess that's the plan at this point. Does anyone want to talk about MUPT or nonprofit tax exemptions? Brian.
I just had one request maybe of staff. If we could get a list of the taxing districts just so we know the players, so we could figure out what 51% might look like, that'd be helpful.
And I believe it's 51% of the gross dollar amount, not 51% of the list of taxing districts. It's 51% of the gross dollar amount.
Okay, then a breakdown of those values for each district would be helpful too. Thanks.
Okay. Anything further on this topic? No? All right. Thanks for being here today, Doug and Amber. Next up, Dowel Road. continuation again of something else we've touched on earlier this year. And I do not see a handout for Dowel Road, is that? Ah, okay, it's part of the big TSP handout, thanks.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I think I'm finally ready here. So today, I appreciate the opportunity to come to speak to you guys about the Dowel Road Amendment to the Transportation System Plan, as well as the other components that are going to be kind of lumped into this Transportation System Plan update or amendment. So first, a little backstory on what we're doing here. The amendments to the Transportation System Plan are subject to review from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, as well as the Urban Area Planning Commission and public comment. To date, this Transportation System Plan update has been sent to the DLCD for review, and it is scheduled for, I think, January 11th for the Urban Area Planning Commission. As you recall, we were trying to beat the clock on this one a little bit to get this all in before the end of the year when the new transportation planning rules go into effect. And we've done that, even though the actual UIPC hearing won't be until afterwards. It's in the queue to get reviewed under the current TPR rules from DLCD. So the US 199 Expressway Plan was adopted by the Oregon Department of Transportation and addresses vehicular and pedestrian upgrades along the US 199 between Tussey and Midway Avenue. The city and ODOT executed a memorandum of understanding in the early 2020 that demonstrated a mutual commitment to moving forward the next phases of the plan. Portions of this plan have been constructed, like the 4-lane roadway that's out by RCC. Sections from Tussey to Dowel Road were further studied in a regional environmental assessment to determine the preferred alternatives. The revised environmental assessment for this section was completed in 2008, and in this section the Highway 199 would be increased from 4 lanes to 6, adding capacity for vehicles. Additionally, Allen Creek and the intersection at Highway 199 would feature more lanes on each intersection leg to accommodate traffic. Proposed was that Redwood Avenue would be shifted at Allen Creek Road to create more queuing distance for proposed vehicles. Since that time, we'll get into that later. With this Dowel Road amendment, ODOT does not think that we need to do that realignment, which would be pretty nice to some of the surrounding businesses there. The existing signal at US 199 and Redwood Avenue would be eliminated, which would require traffic to use Allen Creek Road and Dowel Road to get from Redwood Avenue to Redwood Highway. And I'm going to kind of blow through these because this is review. However, this is what the plan looks like. So as we're kind of over by Bimart, Tussey Lane right now, you'll see it starts widening into 3 lanes in each direction here. As we get to Ringette, and I'll zoom in on the next slide, we still have more lanes which will accommodate more traffic going through on the highway. And it will include additional turn lanes on Ringette, which should alleviate some of the congestion. Some of the turn pockets are a little bit longer, and then you can get the vehicles that are turning left and right out of the travel through lanes, hopefully helping congestion mitigation there. As we head towards the fairgrounds, kind of the same thing. That one's not too exciting. There's 3 lanes, so we're widening it. And then as we get close to Dowel, I'll zoom in again, but we got 3 lanes going through, and we're adding turn lanes both on Dowel and on US 199. And the whole purpose of that is to get more vehicles that can turn and out of the through traffic and keep traffic moving faster, hopefully eliminating or at least reducing some of the congestion. You'll see the yellow line there points to the existing approximate property line, and the other yellow line pointing at that kind of fuchsia pink line is where the proposed right-of-way would need to be. So there will be some right-of-way required along these areas, but it doesn't, tentatively anyways, doesn't look like we're going to actually affect any buildings. It's just some of the space along their frontage. And this is another look a little bit further down Dowel that sort of shows that the proposed right-of-way line will start tapering back into the existing right-of-way line because there's no changes happening in the middle of Dowel Road between Redwood Avenue and Redwood Highway. It's just at the ends where we're adding turn lanes. So ODOT completed a new traffic modeling of the areas surrounding the Allen Creek Road, Redwood Avenue, Redwood Highway, Dowel area last year. And the increased traffic in the Redwood area is projected to bring each intersection into a failing level of service by the year 2045. And implementing this US 199 expressway plan will alleviate some of that congestion, but even as we'll look into the preferred alternatives, most of these intersections are still going to be failing in 2045, even with this plan being implemented. Just more people in the area, more people in Grants Pass, and there's not really enough room to add enough lanes to actually completely fix the problem. So what ODOT's trying to do is make it better, but still in 2045, it's going to be worse than it was today. I suppose the same could be said for most of the intersections and traffic in the whole city, but this is a little snapshot of it. So in the next couple slides, I'm going to outline, hopefully, Jason told me this was confusing, so I'm going to try to walk you through it. So as we look at Dowel Road, the numbers that I have circled are the turning movements that enter Dowel Road, both northbound and southbound. On the left side of your screen, you're going to have the no build in 2045. So that means we do nothing. What is the traffic going to look like in 2045 turning onto Dowel Road? And on the right side, you're going to have the REA revised environmental assessment preferred alternative, including the widening at Dowel Road and what those turning movements look like. So on this slide, you'll see that approximately 280 more vehicles will be turning to head southbound on Dowel Road from Redwood Avenue in the build scenario, the preferred alternative with the widening of Dowel Road. Conversely, as you head north, there's going to be 30 less vehicles in that PM peak hour that enter the roadway. And we'll get into why I think that is here in a little bit. So as we look at, their model is saying that in the middle of Dowel Road is generating some traffic, and that's why these numbers don't directly line up. But here again, northbound traffic, as you're looking at the vehicles that are on Dowel Road going out onto Redwood Avenue or onto the highway, there will be 10 less PM peak hour vehicles headed northbound and 385 more PM peak vehicles heading southbound. So the reason for this increase, and you know, we're widening Dowel Road, and you think, well, why is the traffic going to go up? So one of the things in the revised environmental assessment is that ODOT would like to get rid of the intersection at the fairgrounds. So there would still be a slip lane if you're heading towards RCC. You can still make that free ride onto Redwood Avenue, but you wouldn't be able to exit Redwood Avenue if you're heading eastbound there. So what that does is it pushes more vehicles onto Allen Creek Road and Dowel Road, and that's how the folks from Redwood Avenue are going to kind of get out of there if they are heading into town. So when you're looking at how many vehicles are headed southbound, why those are higher, it's because you can no longer, in this scenario, you can no longer use the intersection by the fairgrounds there, which is pretty heavily used. So that's why you're seeing an increase and why they need some more turn lanes. So to summarize that, if you can compare the 2045 no-build model to the new preferred alternative with Dowel Road widening, there's approximately 385 more vehicles that will be heading southbound during the PM peak hour, and approximately 30 less will be headed northbound. I guess I already talked about all that. That's my synopsis of why. Okay. ODOT has indicated that the Dowel Road project will be included in the state and federal funding required for the US 199 expressway plan and will not require local funding. That's kind of a big deal. This isn't going to hit our gas tax revenues or our street utility fees or any of our local dollars. And so what that does for us is we're able to put that project into our Tier 1 fiscally constrained project list, which means that in the planning horizon of the plan, which is 30 years, these projects are fully funded based on our revenue projections of gas tax and the local street utility. And so when we did that, it did not affect any of the projects that we had in Tier 1. Also, ODOT said that likely the realignment of Redwood Avenue is no longer needed. That was in our Tier 1 fiscally constrained plan, but we were able to move it to Tier 2 since we may not be needing it. And that created kind of a surplus of funding that we had in Tier 1. So in this amendment, since we moved the Redwood Avenue realignment out of Tier 1, we were able to move some bike and ped projects from Tier 2 and Tier 3 to Tier 1. So the ones that we picked were sidewalk infill projects on N Street, Nebraska, in Ringget. So those would be some good projects that backfilled that void. And then one of the main problems that we've been seeing and hearing from committees like the Bikeways and Walkways Committee is that M Street, specifically around 4th and 5th Street, and as you get into 6th and 7th, isn't functioning very well, especially from a bike perspective. And that was one of the projects that we didn't have funding when we originally created the TSP, so it moved into Tier 2. But with the void left by Redwood Avenue realignment, we were able to move those up into Tier 1. And finally, and I guess to me one of the more important things is going to be going into this transportation system plan amendment, is the incorporation of the Safe Routes to Schools master plan. And that is proposed to be volume 4 of the transportation system plan. And this is one that we've been working on for a while. We got a grant from the state, and then they gave us one of their consultants, Alta Planning. And we went through a pretty good public involvement process, as well as working with the schools, school districts, local principals, local parent-teacher associations, walked a lot of these streets around the schools and identified what 2 or 3 of the largest safety-enhancing projects would be within 1 mile of the schools. The reason this is important, of course, keeping kids safe is important, but we also need this to be adopted in our current planning document before we can apply for future grants in the future. One example is we got the Lincoln Elementary School grant, so we're excited about that, working through it. And then we scored very highly in the Parkside grant, but we just got notified that we didn't get it, so next year. But anyways, this will streamline the process because we already have an adopted document that shows what these projects are. And that is it. At this point, I would love to take some questions you guys might have. You will be seeing this come forward unless you direct me otherwise, because the Department of Land Conservation is reviewing it, and soon the Urban Area Planning Commission will be as well. At that point, we'll come forward to you guys.
Do you have questions? Brian?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. The first one is about, you said state and federal funding are going to take care of this project. Does that include all of the right-of-way?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then when you talked about the intersection elimination, you said the fairgrounds, is that the one kind of close to the YMCA?
Yes.
The Redwood Avenue?
Yeah, right by car
junction.
rides there. Yep.
Okay. And is that something that ODOT wants to do?
Absolutely.
Is that something that they're requiring is done?
Yeah, they've done some modeling that showed that that intersection didn't meet a lot of their standards, and there wasn't a real good way to bring it up to that standard. They also don't really like kind of skewed intersections where they don't come together at 90-degree angles. And it's also not really a through one. It's just kind of a way of accessing on and off of Redwood Avenue. So they would like to get rid of that.
Okay, great. And then my last question is about, I know that in our budget this year, we allocated funding for a study for the Fourth Bridge. Mm-hmm. How does that play into all this happening nearby?
Well, they will end up going hand in hand, absolutely. I think that when that project goes through, another pretty extensive modeling process is going to need to take place to make sure that the vehicles that will be using the Fourth Bridge can be accommodated in this area. Right now, we don't really know what effect it'll have. Likely, we can say that it's going to pull quite a bit of the traffic away from the historically bad intersections like Ringette and the South Y and divert them over that way. But no, we haven't actually started that project yet. We're accumulating funding. There will be more slated to go into it next year. So we don't have a consultant on board yet for the fourth bridge.
Okay, is there going to be any sort of unnecessary complication by going through this process we just talked about without taking that into effect in that?
I would say the risk of that is pretty low. ODOT's been putting in for the US 199 Expressway plan for funding for years, probably a decade, and it's never made the cut. The chances of this project getting funded anytime in the next decade or two, I would say, are really slim. So I think they'll end up, if we do the fourth bridge and this project, my crystal ball tells me those will be happening probably in the same time, and we're probably talking 20 plus years out.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Rick?
Thank you, Wade. Could you go to slide 9?
Maybe I don't have numbers, so stop me when I get there.
Okay.
What way to do?
The one aerial photograph that shows, wait a minute, that one there,
Okay.
yes. So you've indicated already that Dowel Road will see more southbound traffic because that intersection on the very left-hand corner of the slide will be closed. But there also, just for confirmation, you will no longer be able to do a right-hand turn exit. You will have to go down to Allen Creek to exit.
Yes, that is correct. So you can go, right there you can see, right here, you can
Yes.
see my mouse. That will still be in place. That would be what we commonly refer to as the slip lane. So you can take a right to get onto Redwood Avenue. You just can't be headed eastbound and get out right there. You'll
Okay.
have to, at that point, be turning on to Allen Creek or Dowel Road.
Good.
Or
I'm glad to
Darnell.
see they're retaining that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Rob?
Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead, Vanessa.
thank you, Wade. I also have a question kind of along the same lines as Councilor DeLaGrange. Now, I know that this discussion today is heavily focused on ODOT's plan for the Redwood Highway Expressway plan, but I fear that it doesn't necessarily take into account our fourth bridge and also the Allen Creek Road expansion. So I wanted to retouch on the Redwood Avenue realignment project. And you did state that it may not be necessary, but was that conclusion decided with those two developments that we are anticipating to happen in that area?
That was reached based on us knowing that Allen Creek Road was the project that we're working on over by Harbeck will be going through. That was included in the model, but no, at this point, there's no link for the fourth bridge that was done in the model. So it does not include the fourth bridge, no.
To follow up on that, does it also consider the effectiveness of that intersection currently, Redwood Avenue and Allen Creek Road?
Yeah, so there's a whole document associated with it, and it modeled Redwood Avenue and Allen Creek Road intersection as well. And this project will make, of course, that intersection a little bit worse in the build versus no build scenario. So Allen Creek Road, if we kept all these intersections in their configuration that they are today, then a lot of those vehicles would still be using that fairgrounds approach and intersection. And so that would if you get rid of that, it's going to move some traffic onto Allen Creek Road as well as Dowel. So this project does make Allen Creek worse in 2045. But it did model it currently and as well as a no-build scenario.
Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, thanks. Wade, first I got to say that this, all your maps and use of color and legends actually made this by far, for me, the most clear presentation that I've had on the subject, is being able to understand what was proposed and so forth. And Actually, I think I pretty much understood the whole thing, actually, which is pretty rare.
Excellent.
So I've got one really, really minor question in the overall scope here. On slide 18, effects on TSP projects. It's really a small question. So the final two lines there about the M and 4th Street signal and M and 5th Street signal, is there some plan or is there a proposal to have some kind of signal at both of those blocks? So it's like basically the traffic at M Street's going to be stopped or every block, one block at a time?
Yeah, right now that's kind of the plan. These TSP projects are at such a high level that they've identified a need there, but they really don't know how it's all going to come together. We would need to probably commission a study there. But likely, there's no way that you could take 4th and 5th and just plug in a couple signals. We'd need to work with ODOT and work on 6th and 7th Street and then figure out how those can all work together. Likely, it would be a synchronized scenario where it wouldn't be stopping when folks are turning off of, you know, when the lights turn green, they'll go green the whole way through those 4 intersections. Kind of like they are on 6th and 7th, how it just keeps staggering so you can keep going through it like 25 miles an hour. So they'd be synced up. But yeah, that is the plan, is we'd be adding a couple signals there and widening them and realigning them a little bit too.
Yeah, I guess if it was synced up, otherwise it would be pretty bizarre to have a signal at four blocks in a row that...
Yeah, and currently, I mean, it's already at capacity, especially on the 7th Street side and in between 6th and 7th.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any discussion on this? Brian?
I have a little bit of a concern about what this is going to do at the Allen Creek intersection. You know, that's a very short block there. And so if that lane by or that intersection at the YMCA is closed, a lot of that traffic's going to be turning onto Allen Creek. And there's not much of a queue there for vehicles, so I fear that there might be vehicles backing up there. And I know this project is surrounding Dowel Road, but it sounds like maybe one of the byproducts of the project might be significantly increased congestion at the Allen Creek, Redwood Ave, and Redwood Highway intersection. So that's just a concern that I have. I don't know if there's anything in the study that, you know, showed that as a concern, but it just seems like common sense that traffic will start backing up there. So that's just one concern I have.
Anybody else? Joel?
Are we on discussion? I guess we are. So actually, I'm in favor of providing direction to continue work on amending it. It's obviously going to need to be done. The traffic that we have today is, I don't know if you've been out there lately, but it's pretty heavy. And without those improvements and adding an increased housing density, which we need to do, we need to have the infrastructure to support that. So it's part of growth and it's what we need to do.
Valerie, then Brian?
Yeah, I have been involved with this for a long time, since I got on, and I recognize that, you know, nothing's perfect, but I do know how bad our constituents have felt about that traffic. It was brought up at the last Thursday night at the strategic planning meeting that we had, that people are still upset with that part of the road, Redwood Highway, going out there. And we know that's where a good percentage of our growth is going to happen. If you look out on my directions are like the worst. On the west side over there, there's going to be a lot of growth out in that direction. So this goes way back to what the need was. And with the new climate-friendly thing coming down, they are really pushing to not do any widening whatsoever in the future, because it'll only be bicycle and pedestrian that they can go to. They can't do any widening of highways. So this is kind of our shot to get it done. And just the fact that ODOT is willing to take it on, that is amazing. I mean, that is huge for our own transportation and because we have limited funding for it. So I think it's really important that we move forward on this for that reason.
Brian?
I just had one more question about the Fourth Bridge study, because I know in our budget this year, we did allocate funding to do some sort of initial study. And so I was just asking staff if you need council direction to take action on that this year, or if that's something that's already in the works.
So we did set aside the first part of money in consultation with Wade. We're going to need some additional financing, so we'll be allocating additional funds this coming budget season for that study to kick off next year, in the next budget year.
Okay, thanks.
Vanessa?
I also have concerns that moving forward on Dowel Road widening may have unintended consequences at the Allen Creek Road, Redwood Avenue intersection. I think arguably at this time, that intersection is approaching near failure level of service. As someone that drives in that area very frequently, the queue time and the wait time are uncomparable to any other intersection in the area. We have heard today that potential for that to get worse is great with the Dowel Road widening. So I think that although it may solve one issue, I think it may be like a whack-a-mole, and another issue may pop up in another place. The US Highway 199 Express Plan is really focused on the Department of Transportation goals, which is to move vehicles and to move commerce. But that's not exactly what our city's goals are in that area. Our city's goals are to move residents throughout the city. And so I think we have to take into consideration our future plans for the Fourth Bridge and for the soon arterial connector of the Allen Creek Road expansion project. So with those two things happening in this very near area, I think it could have serious unintended consequences in the future that really need to be considered.
Rick?
Val, you also made the comment that the new legislation restricts the ability to widen the roads. And if for some reason this project were to be delayed, I could see it would not happen at all. So I think this is one of our last opportunities to help a situation, and then we'll have to abide by the new laws and regulations as we look at the Fourth Bridge way out in the future. Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, and I just want to add, I know everybody wants that Fourth Bridge, but I can guarantee you right now it is on the taxpayers of Grants Pass to pay for that. That's not something that there is funding for. ODOT has not put funding towards any Fourth Bridge down in our area because right now they're doing tolling up in the north end of town to try to get the Washington Bridge over there. So as important as it seems, and it is, and I do know that they're putting together a transportation plan, a transportation on Lincoln improvement. The county and the city are working together to try to get funding for that, and they're tying that in with what they expect the Fourth Bridge to be, because we all know at some point there will be a Fourth Bridge. But I'm just kind of trying to reiterate that the funding for that Fourth Bridge will not be here probably in the next 20 years. So I can't see not doing something that could alleviate our lives now and a lot of people in that area, in hopes that amount of money is going to come dropping down to pay for the Fourth Bridge. I don't see it.
Anybody else? DJ?
Yeah, taking into consideration the concerns on the table, this is a pretty clear direction to pursue. So I'm in favor of moving it forward as presented.
Joel, were you a move forward person? I think your direction was to move forward. Okay. Have 4 people who are interested in having the city manager move forward. Brian?
I'm certainly in favor of moving forward. I didn't want to give the impression that I wasn't. I just wanted to say that I have a concern with the Allen Creek intersections, and it doesn't sound like there has been study or looking at potential alleviation with that aspect of the project. So I am in favor of moving forward. I'm not saying that I want to do the fourth bridge and not do this. I just wanted to get the study for the fourth bridge out of the way, but I'm in favor of the project moving forward.
I do have a question for Wade. On the Allen Creek, I know that right now we are getting our transportation impact analysis done of the street out there. Does that in any way impact Allen Creek? Do they do research on that, how putting in the street is going to impact 199 Allen Creek?
Community Development's actually working with DEA on that particular one. There are 12 intersections that are being looked at as part of that Allen Creek TIA for the future rezone of those 62 acres. So most of them are towards 199, but it's Harbeck. But
New Hope.
they're really, yeah, certainly New Hope, right? But I don't think that for that particular TIA, they're really going to be analyzing to the degree that it would, kind of provide helpful information for this subject that you're talking about today. I mean, they're really just what would the impacts be on those 12 intersections if the land is upzoned to high density.
Okay. And so another question is, another area that's being brought into the urban growth boundary is abutted to Redwood Highway, is it not? I mean, either further west? Is that a part of the UGB? Like across by Schutzwald and that whole area? Is that another area that we're looking for eventually? And that would probably talk about that as well and give it impact, because we have to do an impact study of that area if we decide to bring it in. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that there will be, as we bring in areas, when they do a transportation impact study, they do look at all of the intersections and the traffic patterns that will be brought on by the zoning and development. And so those are kind of talked about along the way.
Rob.
So I am for moving forward here. I just find it, I guess frustrating is the best word to say, that when we're presented with the plans and representations of what the traffic's going to be like between now and 2045, and they look at all the different details except, the vast amounts of new construction that's going to happen, due to the Allen Creek punch through and due to the urban growth boundary changes. It's just amazing that, what's represented to us has been like a scientifically focused, fully studied plan without major variables even considered in the plan. So it's really frustrating for me. And of course the huge variable of the fourth bridge, which, Valerie's saying may not happen due to funding issues, but I guess it's great to have really focused plans, but it'd be really nice if someone was also had a macro view of the situation, and I don't see that we were presented with that, but I still would be for moving forward.
All right, it sounds like council does want to move forward with this, but also just wants us to take a more comprehensive look at the whole Redwood area moving forward as much as possible. Anything further?
Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry to bring it back to questions, but if Wade or Jason could answer, is it Redwood Avenue realignment or Dowel Road widening, or is it possible for us to adopt the Dowel Road widening project and continue forward with the Redwood Avenue realignment?
I would say, Vanessa, this is Wade. I would say that both things are possible, just because the Redwood realignment goes into the Tier 2 list. That's like the 150% overflow list. So if outside funding becomes available, like when ODOT comes in with their giant truck of money to do this project, we could certainly bring the Redwood Avenue realignment project in at that time. So it doesn't go away just because it goes into tier 2. It's still in our plan.
Thank you.
All right, anything further on this transportation plan? Okay. We got some committee motions from Urban Tree Advisory Committee. Brad, is that you?
So what's being passed around now are the motions that the Urban Tree Advisory Committee made to the council at their last meeting. So it's my understanding that we're working with a little bit of a new process here in terms of just bringing forward to you any motions that have been made. You'll see that a couple of these are not likely to really need much action today, mainly, I mean, particularly the two on the back. One relates to your strategic plan goals. Those are just going to be compiled by Karen and, you know, put with all the other committee and commission goals. And then the last one on the second page is the motion to reappoint Nicole Kiefer and repost the other openings for that. So I think those are actions that are, you know, well underway. The other two, the first one relates to the heritage tree, and that would normally be something that we would just take to a business meeting, kind of prepare to show you, you know, the location and make a brief presentation at a business meeting. But again, however, Mayor and Council, how you want to handle this, we're just bringing them forward because they were motions that were made recently. So that leaves the second one on the first page, which is a motion to request City Council. It says purse, I think that should be pursue options for sidewalk alternatives to fulfill the intent of Municipal Code Title 10 for incorporating sidewalk alternatives such as Terra Walk or trip stop or other like alternatives that meet acceptable standards. So this is one that probably would demand, you know, some more information provided to you so you can kind of see what exactly those alternatives look like, how much they cost, how does that relate to our current planning, you know, when we have buckling sidewalks and other issues with pedestrian movement, you know, what are the alternatives? That's kind of what the Tree Advisory Committee is getting at there in terms of helping to protect some of those more mature trees rather than just removing them. So it's a quick overview. We didn't have any PowerPoint for you on this today.
That's fine, thank you. This is just a continuation of trying to find some sort of process on how to get committee motions before you. So I think we tried it at the end of a business meeting, and now here we have it at a workshop. So since it's before agenda review here, I guess the idea is that if any of these things catch anyone's attention and you want to request a workshop or, you know, have it move straight to a business meeting or whatever, or nothing, we could do that. But Rob?
So I'm not sure if this is the appropriate venue to ask this question, but, and I would assume, Brad, that you might know, but on the heritage tree signification, I would assume that the applicant was the person whose tree the property is on, and I would assume that they understand the restrictions that are going to be placed on them if this tree is that accurate? Because that tree essentially dominates their property, and by the letter of the law, they won't be able to do really anything under any part of the canopy of that tree without permits and permission and all kinds. Do they understand all that?
I unfortunately do not know how much communication has happened between the Tree Advisory Committee, the chair, our staff on this one yet.
I can say yes. The applicant was at the last meeting and we discussed exactly those things. And the applicant is very aware of the restrictions.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Rick?
I guess if we're looking for a process of how we want to handle these motions and so forth, I think it would be advantageous to have some sort of diagram associated with each motion, so we'd have a better understanding too of the application and the situation. That would just be an idea I would be putting out there. Thank you.
All right, any questions about any of these motions in particular? Brian?
I have a question about the one regarding sidewalk alternatives. I don't know enough about that to speak intelligently on that topic, so I don't know if it's appropriate for us to ask for a workshop on it. So I don't have enough information to know whether it's a good idea or not, so I need guidance from either the liaison or from staff on what to do.
I'll take this one. So for a while, a brief moment in time, I was the liaison for the tree committee, and we talked about this one extensively. I think a workshop would be great so that you guys can take a look at what these products look like. But I would say that right now, nothing is stopping a person from putting these products in place today. None of them are disapproved or anything like that. The issue kind of comes in at, like the trip stop. It looks like a hinge that you put in a sidewalk so that when the tree roots push it up, instead of fracturing apart and creating a trip hazard, it creates a hinge and the whole thing lifts up. So it's pretty cool. The issue is though, is that the sidewalks are the property owner's responsibility to maintain. And so if somebody came in and proposed one of these things, we'd say absolutely. And in fact, we'd partner with them 50-50 on the sidewalk replacement. But a lot of times it's a lot more inexpensive to cut the tree down and put the sidewalk in place. So I don't know, there's ways that we could maybe make this more clear in our standards that some of these products are available. But really at the end of the day, working through a lot of these, it just ends up hitting the homeowner's pocketbook. And typically people don't have an extra couple $1,000s laying around for some sidewalk hinges.
So it sounds like this is something that can already be done. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, just as far as our process goes, I mean, of course, the committees, they can make a motion about anything they want, right? So it's just a way of getting it to you. This is their, advisory, purview to advise you on things, even if you didn't necessarily ask for them. This is what they want to put before you. So if any of these things spark your fancy and you want to request a workshop, then we could do that when we're doing agenda review, or you could do it 3 weeks from now. It doesn't have, it's not something that has to be done like today, but anyway, now you have them. So that's the goal, is to just get this in front of you and you can read through and see if that's something you want to pursue. Valerie?
Well, we have done other trees, if I'm correct. We did some heritage trees, I don't know, 5th or whatever that was. So we did go through and do those, and I would imagine, they have to go through a resolution, to put them on a meeting, at a city meeting. It has to be adopted. And I would imagine at that time we'd get the picture and where it was located and all the information about it. So I don't know, especially if the owner is aware and is at the committee and is wanting it to happen, I don't know why we can't go ahead and put that on a business meeting.
Agreed. It's just, I received this like the same time you did. So that's what we're kind of getting jumbled up in the process here. But yes, I mean, that one, if they want to put forward, I mean, that's our typical process, I guess, is that that one would automatically go. But, you have 4 motions here and you can see they're all different, and some things need to be dealt with differently than others. So that one can go straight to a business meeting. All right. Are we ready for agenda review? Okay. So next week, no meetings. Our next meeting scheduled is actually December 5th, so we have a little bit of a break there. The December 5th workshop has interviewing some committee candidates and commission candidates for the HBSC as well as the Budget Committee, and then overview of the skate park RFP before that goes out. And then we have a meeting on Wednesday of that same week with a public hearing, the CDBG Community Development Block Grant end-of-year report. A council action item is a resolution amending the subrecipient agreement with Jackson County Housing Authority. Council action item is for an ordinance on the Landon Estates annexation, resolution on a Bragg grant extension for Wild River, and council consent items are a resolution for adopting the city manager's evaluation, a resolution on the city yard facility plan, a resolution for the comprehensive fee schedule amendment, a resolution for the climate-friendly area study IGA, and then appointing some new committee members for the COPA, Committee on Public Arts, and HBSC, and the Budget Committee members for next year, and Tree Committee members. And that would be our last workshop or our last meeting of the year. Rob?
So on December 7th, don't we need to have finalizing the time, place, and manner restrictions for the psilocybin issue? Doesn't that need to be on there?
Probably so, yes. Anything else? Brian?
You had a couple things. The first one's a question. I just want to make sure I'm reading this agenda right. I see we have a workshop December 5th, and then do we not have another workshop until January 30th?
Well, that is what it says right now. I don't know.
It's almost 2 months.
Yeah, this is kind of unusual looking to me, so it looks considerably different than the last one I saw, but I know that we normally would cancel meetings the week of the strategic planning, but it seems like something might be amiss, but I don't have a holiday on a Monday? Okay. Well,
There's also the January 9th meeting that isn't scheduled.
okay. Yeah, I mean, we haven't really looked out beyond basically
9th.
the next couple meetings here, so I think it's subject to change, you know, it doesn't have very much schedule on it, so.
December 12th, we don't have.
Okay, the other thing is I was going to see if we could get on a future agenda, scheduling an executive session to discuss the homeless lawsuit with our legal counsel and get an update and just kind of have a discussion around that.
So an exec session with legal counsel. Okay. Is there council interest in doing that? Yes. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Aaron?
I just have one ask of council. Councilor-elect Yunker has asked that if we do have an executive session, say for instance on the latest one that you requested, and that Mr. Yunker be privileged to be able to attend and review executive session materials. We've done that before with councilors-elect once they've been certified, and wanted to know if council had any objections, because it is you that have the ability to state if you want to do that. So if you would say yes and you're okay with that, I'll just inform him that he does have the ability to have access to executive session.
I say yes.
They're saying yes. Okay. Okay. Anything further right now? Anything else that we need to get done before the end of the year that you can think of? If you think of it later, let me know. And I'll take a look at the calendar and see what's going on for the next couple months here too. Because I know we had talked about not having things late in December, but it does seem like we have a huge gap here. All right. Anything else? Y'all want to go home? Somebody could do it. Bella, yeah.
I'll make a motion to leave and adjourn I guess I didn't realize we had to do that for a workshop. Really? Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. And anyone second? Second from Rick. Thanks. All in favor of adjourning the workshop today, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, I'll oppose.
All right. Brian's just being difficult. We are adjourned until November 21st. Have a good holiday week.